my, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Can I ever tell you the definition of insanity?
Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?
Hello and welcome to episode 51 of PvA Radio. I'm your host, Luke Croft, and we have three additional hosts on the show today. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellokline. Cody, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. And then the prodigal son, he has returned, ladies and gentlemen. It is Larry Hunt.
I have returned.
I'm going to slaughter the fattened calf.
Excellent.
And Cody is going to seethe in jealousy in the corner.
I do seethe.
So there were a lot of things I wish I'd been here to talk about. I really enjoyed the last two shows.
Let's see if he's just saying that or if he actually listened. Which topic in particular, Larry?
I am the greatest May in gold, no doubt. That came up.
Lucky guess.
Lucky guess. Yes. And this wasn't really part of the topic. It was just kind of a side point. But I had this conversation with someone recently. You guys briefly touched on, like, in the Witcher conversation, like how much more successful Stranger Things would be if they released their episodes. They gave us a little trickle instead of just dropping them all at once.
Yeah, so that I can go ahead.
Yeah, I wish these, even though we're streaming things, I wish it would go back to that. Like, we had time to digest, to talk, before we just moved on to the next thing.
And then that voice you heard in the background, I'm assuming, was your daughter? Or was that your son?
It was my daughter.
The words were a little too clear to be your son.
He's getting there. You heard him say no. He has no down.
Yeah, that was awesome. You told him to go to his room and he said, "No, Dad."
Yep.
This is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article or your CAFA, if you will. And Cody, what do we want people to do with it?
We want them to put that emote in the chat and tattoo it to your child's forehead or the closest child's forehead if possible.
Yeah, if you don't have a kid, you don't need to have a kid in order to do it.
Yeah.
Just find the most conveniently close one. So yeah, we do this every Wednesday night, normally at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio. We're a day late today because of a couple different things that were happening. It was going to just be me and Larry last night, but then his power was being funky, and I was like, I don't want to have to one-man this thing if his power just drops out in the middle of the show. So we are instead doing it tonight, and it's storming where I am. So we shall see. If you can't catch us live over here on Twitch, though, you can find us the following day over on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we break it out topic by topic, or you can listen to the entire show in its wholeness, or you can find us on podcast services everywhere, including iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're getting this on Telegraph.
I will send you a cassette tape if you write a letter to me.
Also, for the price of $100, we'll send a quartet to your door, and they will sing the entire podcast to you in perfect harmony. Barbershop quartet, that is. So
I love a good quartet.
Me too, man. I just love a good harmony.
Yeah.
All right.
I wish I could be a part of one.
Enough of these shenanigans, guys. I don't really have any housekeeping. Let's just get right to it with what have you been playing. Cody, what games has your thumbs been controlling you to go through?
That was a sentence.
You Englished very goodly there.
Thank you.
I've been playing a bit. As I said before, my girlfriend is out of town, so I have an abundance of time to play games. Some might say too much. I've been chugging through Sekiro. And really enjoying it. I told you, I think before we started recording the other day, Luke, I think that is my favorite game of the year so far. I enjoy it more and more the farther into it I get. I'm actually really, really into the world and the lore and the story. I've been watching lore vids, at least up until the point I am in the story and the game. I'm just loving it. I just beat a boss right before I hopped on here, actually. And it only took, I thought it was going to take me longer. It only took me about half an hour. So I'm getting better. I feel it. I feel my reflexes tightening. I feel the power coursing through my veins. I am getting good.
So what you're saying is...
I am Sekiro.
So what you're saying is next step is you becoming a speedrunner in Sekiro, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's definitely what I'm doing next. And then I also picked up, this is a callback, I picked up the Banner Saga 3.
I was about to say, I was like, I feel like I've seen this game on your list like months ago.
Yeah, I played the first two and then never got around to the third one because I just didn't feel like spending the money, but it was on sale for $10 on the Nintendo store, so I picked it up. Really, I really like that series a lot. The same things that I liked about the last ones, I like about this one: the art style, the turn-based combat. They really have there's a very concrete sense of like oppression, and you're barely getting by the skin of your teeth. That's in line with the narrative, which is really cool. I never feel like I'm really coming out of fights ahead, and it's sort of at that point in the story where it's tough for every single group of protagonists, and they're just kind of barely scraping by as enemy forces knock at the door. So it's working. I like that works in concert. And then the other thing I've been playing is Wolfenstein Youngblood.
Nice.
I do really like the series, and this one's been getting bashed in reviews, and I can see why. It definitely does not have the same strengths as the other two. The narrative is not front and center. The narrative is relatively forgettable, which is a huge disappointment for me. But I do think it's a game about cooperative gameplay and cooperative shooting, and there are so few cooperative campaign-based games out that I'm actually enjoying it more than I thought I would. I'm playing through with my brother, and like this past weekend was I refer to as my self-care weekend because I fucking stomped fascists in Wolfenstein and then watched them die in Inglourious Bastards. So it's like, just watching all the Nazis die was just it's what I needed. But it's fun. I mean, the gameplay is pretty much the same as the others, so it's pretty rock solid. It has a bit of Arcane's kind of open-endedness in some of the levels. But the narrative is very disappointing. It was clear that was not their focus. It's a side story, I get it, but I would have liked to see a little bit more of that.
Mm-hmm. It's not a full release, right? It's a $30 game?
No, it's $30, but you can buy it for $40, which is what I did, and you can give a pass to a friend for free who doesn't have the game, and they can play it with you for free.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother didn't have to buy it. I'm just playing it with him.
Okay. Oh, that's really cool. It took the a way out approach.
Yeah, exactly. I think you have like 5 passes you can give out. But I'm just gonna play with him, so it doesn't really matter.
Those 5 passes that you give out, is it where you have to be playing in order for those passes to work? Okay. Yeah. That's cool.
And I'm still not sure so we only played one session the other day and it was for a few hours. So I'm not sure if when he jumps back in, if all his progress and upgrades are still there. Mm-hmm. That would be a very big disappointment if they were not, because that's a large part of the game.
That's funny, man. I've seen so much about this game, and yet I don't feel like I've seen that little tidbit about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know I haven't, because you telling it to me is like a huge shock to me. Not shock, but surprise.
I thought it was a pretty cool thing for just an extra $10. It doesn't seem like that much to be able to play with someone for free.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Now I've seen some stuff like mechanically in terms of like ammunition, things like that, where there's some negative feedback going on there. Are you sensing anything within the mechanics themselves that makes it a little harder for you to play?
Yes. Because you are upgrading character traits and weapons, there's a new level-based system for enemies. So whatever level you are, if you're fighting an enemy that's that level, it'll be relatively simple. If not, they'll take more damage. And there are various super hard enemies who have a symbol next to their name, and that symbol corresponds to the kind of ammo you're using. If you use that ammo against them, then you're stronger against them. That hasn't been too big of an issue, but I also haven't run into it that much. The level system is, in a lot of ways, kind of frustrating. I'm just used to the game kind of being fast and fluid, and the level system sort of creates hard stops for you that are kind of disappointing. They're like sort of traditional boss battles that are also pretty lackluster, especially when you're playing co-op, where you can pretty much just like surround him on both sides, and then they can't really go anywhere. The ammo thing hasn't come into play yet, but I'm wondering if it will later in the game.
Yeah, how far are you through it?
We've played about 4 or 5 hours, and I don't think it's particularly long. I heard it's about around 10 hours. So I feel like I'm halfway.
Okay. It's crazy, man, because it used to be that 10 hours was a $60 campaign, you know? Like, you go back to like old Uncharted games, you know, you were probably 12 hours, 13 hours for a campaign. And then
all the Uncharted games are like that, even the fourth one.
I thought the fourth one was a little longer. But
it was still around I still ended up having like 12, 13 hours.
Yeah, which is why it kind of blew my mind that everybody like shat on the Order 1886 for being 6 hours long. I think there are a number of reasons that game wasn't worth $60, but I'm not really sure that the 6 hour length was part of that reason.
Yeah, I don't think so.
The Telegraph story, probably.
The guy whose name means wolf is the main bad werewolf guy. Spoiler alert. I'm sorry, I just ruined the game for everyone.
It spoils itself in the first hour. So. All right. Larry, what have you been playing?
Well, I've been playing a lot the last few days, last week really, because I was gone for a couple weeks. First, went up to Boston to meet Cody's family and his girlfriend.
Jesus Christ.
We loved having you there. We loved having you.
Unbreak my heart.
He was listening to the podcast.
That's what I've been doing while you guys were talking, is just like skipping through to see what I could drink.
Oh, it's good to have the boys. They're back in town. The boys are back in town.
But anyway, so once I got back, I jumped into Apex. The other night we played Overwatch together. I'm glad to do that. Once that roll lock is in place, I'm going to be all about that game again. It'll make the game enjoyable for me again.
Salty as Chuck says, "It was good to meet you, Larry. Thanks for inviting me." If you want to participate in the chat with us, you can watch us live over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio.
So yeah, I think Rollock is going to get rid of a lot of the things that I have issues with in Overwatch, and I'm excited to try that out. And then after you guys got off, I got back on Apex and played until 2 a.m. Oh I had to catch up on those weekly challenges.
Yeah, when he's like, you guys want to hop on Apex, he's only joking about a quarter of the time.
Yeah. and even when I'm joking, if were like, says, yeah, I'll do it, I'd probably be like, you know what? It's a bad decision, but I'm down.
I'm in.
And then the other thing is my family, we picked up Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. So I'm having fun with it. It's everything I expected it to be. It's kind of a cheesy story. Like, I'm not super emotionally invested in what's happening, but it's just a fun game where I can put together whatever team of heroes I want and beat the crap out of bad guys.
You mean you didn't expect to be gripped by a once in a century narrative?
I mean, yeah, I was. I'm a little disappointed. The voice acting is a lot better than the other two games, so that's a nice touch. And I'm thrilled that my daughter is able to play it with me. It's fun. It's going to be our first game that we really play through together. I don't count Paw Patrol to the Rescue. It didn't get its hooks in me. But team? My son can't quite handle it yet. Huh?
What's your squad?
So we don't have them all unlocked yet, but I'm typically running Captain America. My wife's running Captain Marvel. We got a Spider-Man in the mix, so my son thinks he's playing. And and then my daughter has been alternating between Hulk and I can't remember, and Groot. But now that we have Spider-Gwen unlocked, that's probably going to be the go-to. We just unlocked all the spider people, so right now our squad is actually just a bunch of spider people, but it's not going to stay that way.
Spider-Verse.
Nice.
Yep.
So I've been playing some Overwatch as well, and Salty's Chuck in the chat says, so speaking of Rollock, I listened to last week's to the last show today, and by today I'm sure he means right now. He's scrubbing through it to make it seem like he was listening to it.
Same.
He says, Luke, did you feel like you were taking PTR seriously? Because I did. I like it a whole lot, and every one of my games, win or loss, seems to be enjoying it a lot too. I mean, I take the PTR seriously. I don't tend to get tilted as much in the PTR just because it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But I'm a tryhard when I play that game for the most part, unless we're playing quick play on Xbox or something like that.
Street Heroes.
So I take it seriously, but I'm with you. I feel like everybody's getting a little more enjoyment out of it. And Salty, I don't know how much you've played in the PTR before this. I feel like that's kind of the general sense you get in the PTR anyway, which is why I'm hesitant to make a whole lot of assumptions off of the PTR on how people are going to respond and act once Rollock is in the live patch, because I just think PTR people, number one, they're a lot more into the game and understand the game, I think, a lot better. And number two, I think most people recognize, like, this doesn't mean anything, so why get tilted? But yeah, playing Overwatch, I'm excited that Larry is excited to get back into it, because, you know, I'm always into Overwatch.
And
If you guys hop back in, I'll hop back in.
All right, well, Cody's in. What'd you say, Larry?
And you need more good Mays in your life.
I do, because every single May I ever play with other than Larry fucking sucks.
When I have to play with a May, I get so tilted because they're all bad.
Because they don't understand their wall.
Yeah,
they
use it
understand
as
what the wall
shield.
does. All right, we won't turn this into Overwatch 3 podcast.
Maybe you won't.
I've also been playing, I don't have it on the list here. Guys, I think I'm starting to get League. Like, it's clicking. I played last night with my brother-in-law for, I think we played like 4 games. And I didn't feel like I was dragging the team down the whole night. In the last 2 games, I actually kind of popped off. And that game is all about, like, so my brother-in-law is insane with his level of knowledge. Like, when we're in the loading screen and it's showing the champions that the other team has selected, he's like walking me through the matchups. He knows like numbers of damage. He knows seconds for cooldown. And I kind of get glazed over because of just the amount of information that he's feeding me. But I've been playing a lot of jungle. And what I've learned is, like, the key to playing jungle is going in with a game plan and understanding the lanes that you want to help get ahead and doing that. And so the games where I really focused on that, I was able to succeed, had a lot of fun, and then so yeah, League is that I've got the feeling with League that I've had for Overwatch for a long time, of like, I just want to keep playing and keep getting better at this and keep finding other people who want to try hard with me on it. So if any of you guys want to jump into League and be a PC nerd like me, come on over. I keep trying to talk Larry into it because I'm sure his PC could run it.
I've got an account. I just got to fire up the old Carl Bridges account.
That was a professor of ours in college. You know, identity theft is a felony, Larry.
In college, I played with a team, and we each had a different professor's name as our account name. I don't understand it, but we did it.
And then I played Madden 20. I don't want to dwell here too long because, number one, I'm super disappointed by it, and number two, I know a lot of people don't care about sports games, but I have owned every single Madden since Madden 95. So that is 25 straight years of Madden ownership. I am only 29 years old. So that is a large portion of my life. That is 5/6 of my life that I have owned the latest Madden game. This is the first year that I will not be spending my money on the latest Madden. I've been playing the 10-hour trial through EA Access, and I'm just like, I'm not sure if I can pay $240 for the same game, which is what it amounts to. The game has not changed in 4 years. I've paid $60 for it every year. So I've essentially paid $180 for the same game, and I'm not sure I can bring myself to spend another 60 on it. And it's very, very disappointing to me. And the story mode in that game, it's the most asinine and ridiculous thing I've ever seen. You play as this guy who was like a 5-star recruit in high school. And you get to choose the college that you go to, and the story picks up in your senior year. You're going into the semifinals of the playoffs. You have never taken a snap in a college football game, and I'm supposed to have these 2 performances of a lifetime back to back, and all of a sudden I can be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Come on, son. So it's it's a little it's disappointing, and I'm sad, and I'll probably end up jumping right back into it in the PS5, Xbox 1-2 generation. But for now, I'm going to take my break because there's so many great games to play, like League of Legends right now. And who's got the time? And Rainbow Six Siege, which I have not jumped back into since I started playing it last Sunday, but I hope to with my long weekend.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen this game, The Blackout Club?
Yeah, we talked about it 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I might buy that game. It looks right
pretty
up my
cool.
alley.
It also is supposed to be pretty janky, but
Oh, well. Never mind.
How much is it?
I mean,
it's not a full. I don't think it's a full price.
Larry, you can't hear it's supposedly janky and turn your nose up at it when you've played 775 hours of fucking Fallout 76, all right?
And PUBG.
And PUBG. Well, PUBG you bitched about the jankiness for the whole time we played. So we won't count that. But Fallout 76
was a flawless game from launch, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Notice he's using was. That game is still being supported and still has a player base, but he has moved on.
I have not moved on.
Are you going to jump into the raid?
I would like to. I don't know anything about if there are any requirements, if I'm leveled enough for it or that kind of thing.
I'm sure
And I don't have any friends. So.
I'm sure there's a level requirement. The one thing I don't like about the raid is it's like, I think you can play on the lowest difficulty and there's no time constraints and it's still a challenge, but then everything else is like, you have to complete it in a certain amount of time. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't like timed things. It stresses me out.
Me neither.
So
I love, one of my favorite experiences ever has been the Destiny raids. Just no artificial constraints, just you can't figure this out, so you're stuck constraints.
mm-hmm.
It was a blast.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'd love to do another blind raid sometime in my life. Salty as Chuck says, I watched a lot of the Blackout Club yesterday, and devs were teleporting players and messing with them in real time. That's weird. I don't know. Is it a game like that? Like, is it an online game? I guess you can play co-op.
It is online.
Okay. Interesting.
Multiplayer.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. So that's what we've all been playing. So let's move on to our topics. Larry, what are you going to serve on this beautiful table we've set for you this week?
So Twitch is a platform where streaming happens. And there are some people that stream, and there's one guy who's he's kind of well known, a fellow by the name of Ninja. Today, I mean, essentially, if you know a Twitch streamer, it's Ninja, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my grandpa might know who Ninja is. He is Twitch for many people, and today he announced that he is going over to Mixer, and he will exclusively be a Mixer streamer now. And so that really shocked me. And so I don't have a lot of like preordained discussion questions here, but why do you think this has happened? Did Mixer back up a dump truck of money like Apex did, or did Ninja go there because he thinks Mixer is a better platform? What are your thoughts on that? This
is no doubt, not a doubt in my mind. If if it is anything else, I will be utterly shocked. I will move to the Galapagos Islands and live with whatever those things Charles Darwin was observing. Was it birds?
Canaries.
Canaries, all right? And I will become a canary slowly over time in order to adapt to the environment. If this has anything to do with other than the money. Like,
Yes.
it would make no sense from a financial standpoint. And I actually read a tweet. I don't want to steal this thought. It's from esports host Frankie. Is it Frankie Ward? I think her last name is Ward. She used to work at Twitch, and she said something that was happening with Ninja was he was scheduling all of these like outside speaking engagements, and so his stream schedule had gotten all crazy. Like, he didn't stream consistently, and anybody who streams knows that, like, regardless of how large you are, in order to gain real momentum and real sustainable momentum, you have to stream consistently. And so he had been losing out on a lot of his subscriber base had been going down. And part of that is due to the fact that Fortnite isn't quite as popular a game on Twitch as it used to be, despite the fact it's still, regularly in the top 3 most viewed games. But and there are also a lot of other big streamers in that category, but also because he was picking up all of these other engagements, he was losing subscribers. And so she seems to think that Ninja made the jump because this was going to supplement his loss that he's been seeing with his subscriber base, and would still allow him. I mean, he's writing a book that he's likely going to be touring around to promote. He's got a lot of other engagements that he does outside of just streaming. And if Microsoft has given him the money to pursue those things and still continue to be successful in streaming, like, why wouldn't you do that? So it has to be about the money. It makes no sense any other way.
Yeah, there are also rumors going around that Mixer or Microsoft were offering a lot of people money to kind of convert over to Mixer. So this might not be the only person we see making the migration over if that is the case. But yeah, it's definitely they just backed up a dump truck of money to his house and just said, jump on in the Mixer train, come on.
Well, and now everybody who signs up for Mixer gets a 1 month free subscription to Ninja that comes over. So there's that too. They're going to pull over a lot of Ninja's subscribers just through that.
He already has something like 100,000 subscribers.
Good Lord.
Wow.
Which is nuts.
Well, that kind of already addresses my next question. Well, I mean, first off, absolutely, you're right. Dump truck of money. That's the only thing that makes sense. And anyone who thinks that this was just a transition out of a desire to switch things up, nah, you're wrong. But my next thought was, do you think this will really impact Twitch? Or do you think, I've been thinking about this all day. Like, will we see a lot of his subscribers like move over and watch him on Mixer? Or will we see like, you're such a sellout, man? Like, I think about Epic Games. I know it's a completely different kind of market, but Epic offered like better deals for game developers. But the people that should have been like supportive of that instead were angry that they had to like shift platforms. So which of those attitudes do you think will win out in this situation? Ninja fans or Twitch fans?
I think the overlap in the Venn diagram between the people who subscribe to Ninja on Twitch and who get upset about Epic Games is not that large. Like, I think a lot of people who probably subscribe to Ninja are younger, number one. They are really solely interested in Fortnite and Ninja as a personality, and I don't really think it matters where he goes. There's gonna be, I don't think there's a lot of, and I also don't think there's a lot of negative sentiment around Mixer like there is around Epic, and so and also they're Fortnite fans, so they have high views of Epic to begin with, So, but from the, I think it's really interesting to talk about the impact on Twitch, because I think there's this growing sentiment around bigger streamers, and not even bigger streamers, smaller streamers as well, that Twitch is just kind of the necessary evil to enable what they do. Like, at the end of the day, Twitch is kind of a shitty platform to stream on because from just the pure financial perspective, every dollar you make on this platform, Twitch takes 50% of. They take 50 cents of every dollar. And so and that changes as you get partnered, and that, you know, it becomes more advantageous to the creator. But I think people are looking for other places to go to stream. If there was another platform that we could go and stream on where discoverability was better, where there were more built-in tools for smaller creators to get seen, I would advocate us moving to that platform in a heartbeat. Twitch doesn't do that. And Twitch often steps on their smaller creators in order to promote their larger creators. And so so I think there's a growing sentiment that people want another place to go. But I also think it's going to create some healthy competition, which has not really existed for Twitch to begin with. Because I think it is going to pull subscribers over because people are going to be over on Mixer. And then Mixer does have some discoverability tools built in. And when Ninja goes offline, people are going to want to poke around, and they're going to retain a lot of people watching Ninja going to other channels. And so I don't know if it's necessarily going to be like an earth-shattering impact on Twitch, but I think it's going to be noticeable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll open the door. I mean, I think there are quite a few people who, especially younger people, for whom maybe Ninja is really the only person they watch, or at least the biggest person they watch, the person they watch the most. And I think him migrating to Mixer and then those fans migrating to Mixer, it just kind of makes sense that there's going to be a little bit of it just exposes them to a platform they probably had not even heard about. Like, not only is there no negative sentiment around Mixer, there's no sentiment around Mixer, period.
Exactly.
And I think this is it's obviously a huge chance for them. It'll be a good bit of exposure for them. And I think once people are on the platform, they'll start, like you said, Luke, start exploring a little bit, start kicking around, and maybe they'll stay around. Of course, they'll also still have their Twitch subscription or their Twitch account. So it's not really doesn't really necessarily have to be an either or situation. I'm sure people will be platform agnostic as well. But I think this is definitely an opportunity for Mixer.
Yeah. Saltiest Chuck, kind of related to that, says LL Renee was one of the first that I knew, but I heard quite a few were offered. She used to average 800 to 1200, but gets around 200 to 300 on Mixer. The viewer base just isn't as large by a fair margin. And you know, that's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Mixer doesn't have as many people, but that's the purpose of this. You get this wave to come over with Ninja, and they're going to stick around and check other people out when he's not streaming, and over time that might change a bit.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it in the nicest way that I can think of, all right? LOL Renee, like, I don't know who the fuck that is, you know? Like, and the thing with a Ninja, this move from Ninja, is not just Ninja's fan base. Raise your hand if you're on this podcast and you subscribe to Ninja on Twitch. No hands are up for the audio listeners out there. None of us subscribe to Ninja on Twitch. If you're in the chat, let me know if you guys subscribe to Ninja. Like, but the fact is that Ninja is a name that people outside of Ninja's circle knows. There were mainstream media articles published today about Ninja moving from Twitch over to Mixer. Like, this is a monumental move for Mixer as a platform, because you're getting all kinds of brand recognition and you're getting all kinds of free press outside of the truckload of money you backed up to Ninja. But people are running with this story that are outside of not only Ninja circles, but Twitch's circles, streaming circles, and gaming circles. And that's massive. And that's something that you don't get with LOL Renee, and not to diminish anything that she's doing. That, you know, 1,200 viewers is nothing to scoff at, and I'm sure he's going to take a hit in viewership numbers. But the impact of this is far larger than really. Can you think of another streamer that they could have gotten that would have been bigger? I mean, DLive tried to do this with PewDiePie, with whatever its success was.
Dr. Disrespect's pretty popular right now.
That's true. Maybe
Infamous
Mixer
is
will
probably the
let
better
him
word.
stream from a bathroom.
So as far as Twitch as a platform being not good, I do want to recommend a discussion of that I heard on another podcast called Press Go Live. I think it was the most recent episode of that. You guys talked a bit about Twitch as a platform and what it could do better. And I'm a big advocate of having competition. So I'm kind of like rooting for Mixer to yank a bunch of Twitch viewers, not to destroy Twitch. I don't want to see it burn to the ground, but I want to see Twitch get this kick in the rear where they're like, okay, we gotta make this more appealing to people than it is right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Salty as Chuck clarifies, he says, I understand that LOL Renee isn't known, but the point is they were doing it with multiple users who were in the 1,000-person bracket, hoping to get 5 to 10 users who could bring over 5,000 to 10,000, which I didn't think worked out for them at all, which is a weird strategy to begin with. Like, because we have historic evidence of people moving between platforms and the drop off in viewership that that they get. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, we're gonna see probably cross multiply and divide ratio with Ninja's viewers when he comes over as well. Like, I don't know what Ninja averages when he's live. I think it's something like 40,000 people. So he'll probably see about 70% of that come over to watch him on Mixer. And so I don't know why Microsoft would invest in doing that with some of these relatively smaller streamers who are pulling a few hundred viewers, because those ratios of they're known quantities.
Mm-hmm.
Also, hi Bill for real. We haven't really read his chat contributions.
Yeah, he said Tommy Weiss. Is it Wiseau? I see the name and know who it is, but I don't know how to say it. Is it
Tommy
Wiseau? He streamed today.
Oh, really?
Apparently over on Mixer.
Oh, and 4 hours ago, Ninja tweeted over 100K subscribers have been redeemed so far on Mixer.
Which is another brilliant move from Microsoft, because how many of those people are going to renew when they actually have to pay for it? Like, it's a button in their header right now when you go to log on to your Mixer thing. And so they can artificially inflate that number, get a second round of media coverage because Ninja has 500,000 subscribers or whatever on Mixer. Like, oh my gosh. And then smaller creators who aren't wise enough to dig into it are like, holy shit, he grew his subscriber base by how much by moving over to Mixer? I'm taking my shit and going over there. Like, it's such a smart move from Microsoft.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wisso. And Saltiest Chuck says it as well. They're all free.
And the timing of this is excellent as well, because we just had Fortnite making a big splash in the news. Ninja's known for Fortnite. Like, no better time to snipe Ninja than when they've sniped Ninja.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was all over the World Cup.
I joked, but it is their only exclusive, pretty much.
Yeah. Bill for real actually had a good write-up over on Popped Off. You should go check it out. He talked to a few people about, what would get them to move over from Twitch to a different platform, and he kind of talks about strengths and weaknesses of each streaming platform. And I think like you said, Cody, it's good for Twitch to have somebody breathing down their neck and making big money moves. Like, DLive, despite the PewDiePie move, was never going to be able to do that. But like, Mixer is owned by a company who knows this space, or at least knows the gaming space, and has the money to go toe to toe with an Amazon. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see how it pans out. All right. Well, let's move on to my topic, which is kind of adjacent. I want to talk about the Fortnite World Cup and its place in the gaming world and in the esports world. So over the weekend, the Fortnite World Cup took place, and it was nothing short of a monumental success. I just want to read some of these numbers from their press release, all right? They released this yesterday over on epicgames.com. It says over 40 million players participated. Only the Fortnite World Cup champions remain standing. The best Fortnite players in the world met in New York City July 26th to the 28th to compete in the $30 million Fortnite World Cup solo and duos final. $3 million creative finals, and $3 million charity pro-am. This event was the culmination of 10 weeks of $1 million online open qualifiers with more than 200 countries participating. Over 19,000 fans attended the 3-day Fortnite World Cup finals in person at the sold-out Arthur Ashe Stadium. On Sunday, during the solo finals, concurrent viewers peaked at over 2.3 million across YouTube and Twitch, making the Fortnite World Cup the most watched competitive gaming event, excluding China, of all time. Guys, did you guys have a chance to watch any of this event?
I felt like I probably should have, since we talk about games, but it just doesn't interest me.
So I watched a couple matches of the finals just because I listened to a podcast that talked about how crazy the production quality of it was. I wasn't like super blown away by the production quality. I thought it was good. I think it was a technical feat to have 100 players playing all at one time on stage. But outside of that, I wasn't like super blown away with how the presentation was done. But regardless, I was like, I'll check out a couple matches because I know I wanted to talk about it. I grew an appreciation in those two games for the amount of strategy that goes into a Fortnite match, and it kind of helped color some of my opinions on RNG in games like this, because that tends to be a criticism of it, and we'll get to that here in a bit. But one of the main things I noticed just in watching it was how engaged the audience was and just entertained by it, despite the fact that it's really, really, really hard to keep up with what the fuck is going on in this game because there's so many people participating. But I don't want to necessarily talk about the event. I don't think we're really equipped to talk about the event since none of us watched, either any of it, or I only watched 2 matches, so not even a significant portion of it. What I want to talk about is the conversation that was going on around the Fortnite World Cup. And so let's just talk first and foremost about, like, what are your reactions to the overwhelming success of the event? Your thoughts on Fortnite as an esport and what this success may mean in the world of esports.
In spite of the popularity of Fortnite, I was surprised by the extent of the success. I heard people talking about this that I didn't expect to talk about. I walked into my church's staff meeting, and the senior minister says, "Did you hear about this Fortnite tournament where this kid won like millions of dollars? Isn't that crazy?" And I was like, "Yeah, did not expect to talk about this here. What?" So yeah, it was a huge deal, and I think that this is a good thing for legitimizing esports as a legitimate type of sporting, a legitimate type of competition in people's eyes. Like this isn't just like a bunch of people like just sitting around playing games. Like there's some real competition with real stakes, and people are winning real prizes. And I mean, the ball is already rolling on esports becoming legitimate and growing in popularity. One of the kids that's typically at my church camp wasn't there this year because he went to an esports camp instead. But this is going to be another big stride in that direction for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by its success because we all know the reach that Fortnite has. But I still think like the numbers you were naming off are absurd. And I think this is a pretty significant milestone for Fortnite, obviously, but also, like Larry said, for esports. Obviously, we talk about esports a fair amount on this show because, Luke, you're super into that world, and I find that world interesting. And we talk about it, and I sometimes feel as though we talk about it like we're in a bubble, and we kind of overestimate the popularity of it in some ways. I do think, obviously, esports is massive. It's an industry that organizations in traditional sports have invested millions of dollars in. Sponsors are investing millions of dollars in. It's massive. And League, Overwatch, Counter-Strike, all these games have a really solid esports foundation, a pretty sizable esports foundation. But when you look at something like this, which not only is massive in terms of its prize pools, but massive in terms of its viewership and the coverage it got. Because you not only talk about the people who are talking about it out in the world, but this is being covered like a sport by traditional media outlets, like a traditional sport by traditional media outlets, which is pretty significant. Like some of these outlets have games reporters and have esports reporters because they've caught on to the fact that this is kind of the next wave of athleticism. But I saw outlets covering it that I never would have thought would cover it, like local outlets that have national sports reporters were covering it, which is pretty significant. And it tells you that the audience is there for this. The audience, they recognize that this is a thing. It's a legitimate thing. Like you said, Larry, this just furthers the legitimization of esports in the world. And that's like the coldest take possible. That's not, that's like very obvious.
Yeah.
But it's worth saying.
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
It's a major milestone for esports as a whole.
And for gaming, I think. If esports is legitimized, I think we can finally start moving past you're just a jobless 40-year-old man-child living in your mom's basement if you play video games.
Which, I'll be honest with you, I saw the people who were covering it afterwards, like, BBC, NBC News, Fox News. I saw that, I don't want to get the guy's name wrong. It's Kyle something. Kyle, is it Bugga? Giesdorf is the 16-year-old who won. He went on Jimmy Fallon's show. I'll be honest, I did not look at any of the coverage because I tend to just get frustrated by the way that people talk to these, esports competitors. Like last year, for example, Jake and Raucus from the Houston Outlaws went on I think it was Good Morning America, and they did the whole you live in your mom and dad's basement to him, and it was real shitty because it was 2 weeks after Raucus's dad had died, and whoever was interviewing him didn't take the time to look into anything about him. And so I tend to not watch the coverage because I get secondhand embarrassment for the dumbass reporters who ask dumbass questions of these kids. But I did see the scope of the coverage and how massive it was. And it wasn't just like a segment, it was rotating segments, in national coverage, hey, we're going to run this story every 25 minutes. And and I think that that's huge. And so there was a tweet from esports consultant Slasher over on Twitter, and anybody who who keeps up with esports knows the name Slasher. And it was a super simple tweet. He just said, Fortnite is a tier 1 esport. And people had to come in with their hot takes about RNG and Fortnite's a baby game and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, consultant. Number 1 esports consultant, Beal for Real says. Slasher is kind of a polarizing figure in the esports scene. But regardless, you can see why, because this tweet was polarizing even in its simplicity. But out of all of the crazy hot takes that Slasher has, I think that this is the most objectively correct one. How can you say that something that pulled in 2.3 million concurrent viewers gave away over $30 million in prize money and his national coverage in mainstream media, how can you call it anything other than a tier 1 esport? We need to get beyond this elitism that we have in gaming, because we constantly fight this battle of legitimization amongst ourselves, not just in esports, but in gaming in general. And when we infight amongst ourselves and bicker and bitch over things that don't ultimately matter, all it does is make it harder and harder to focus our attention and really figure out how to drive the conversation forward in the mainstream, so that we're not sitting through interviews with living in your mom and dad's basement jokes, or what are you going to do when you grow up kind of things with 25-year-olds who are, traveling around the world to participate in tournaments and things. So I think Fortnite was a huge success. I do want to talk really quickly about the RNG thing.
Real fast before we move on to that, because I want to comment on that. it's a child's game. It's for kids, and I mean, granted, that's most of the audience for the game, but like not giving it credit where credit is due, and calling it childish. It's just so it just makes no sense to me. Like all of us who have this hobby of gaming have dealt with that, right? Like, oh, you like this thing? That's kind of childish of you. So why would we turn around and do that to somebody else? Like,
Yeah.
just nonsensical.
Yeah. It makes no sense. One of the only like legitimate, not legitimate, but seemingly legitimate arguments about Fortnite as an esport is the RNG thing. And I want to talk about this for a second. As an expert who watched 2 matches of this Fortnite World Cup, I made an observation, and it was this. In the first couple minutes of the match, only like 4 or 5 people died, which is insane to me. I figured like people be dropping left and right in this thing, you know, because there's such highly skilled players. And so the argument in any battle royale is like you're kind of beholden to whatever you drop into and get. But these players are so skilled and have their game plan in mind and their plan B and plan C and plan D for, you know, what scenarios they may drop into planned out in their head so well that it really doesn't matter what they find when they drop. They have something in mind to do in reaction to it. And so we were getting to the final circle in these 2 matches, and there were still like 30 people alive in this tiny ass circle with towers going, you know, 75 miles into the air as this tiny circle's moving across the map. And so I don't know. Just in watching 2 matches, I was like, I don't think the RNG in this thing matters as much as people are saying, because it was also a six game series. And the way the scoring works, like the more kills you get, the more points you get. You don't necessarily have to finish in first to win the round if you play aggressive enough. Like there are things to make up for the randomness within it that I think give it back its competitive edge.
Yeah, we talked about this the other day. And I think the RNG is there to a certain extent, but I think you're right. You know where the high tier loot areas are if you play the game long enough. Even people who aren't pros know those areas. I think I'm probably overestimated the effect that it can have on a game, but I think contrary to what people are saying, I think the light randomness it adds to the game is actually sort of exciting. It adds an unpredictability to it that I guess for a lot of people who love esports and video games at a competitive level, that might seem like something that's distancing, that kind of doesn't, they're supposed to be an even playing field. But I think your ability to adapt is part of the battle royale and speaks to your ability as a player. So I think it actually enhances the experience. I don't think it detracts from it.
And the reality is that even in actual sports, there are elements of luck. And I heard your guys' conversation on this actually the other night. But in soccer, you can't control, sometimes it's going to rain, and that's going to affect how the ball bounces. You don't know if your shin is injured in such a way that when you come down from that layup, it's going to come shooting out of your leg and ruin all of our lives forever. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Scarred forever. Scarred. Like luck is a part of everything. And in mastering anything, in getting good at anything, there are people that realize that luck plays a role, but I need to learn how to do the best I can with what I've got. And then there are people that blame the luck element for all of their failures.
Like me. Like when I drop in Apex and I'm like, well, there were no guns in this area.
Right. And not to say that it doesn't make an impact at all, but I think that watching these people who are good at this game play should show us that the luck is probably not as big a reason that we're losing our matches as we would like to think that it is.
Oh no, I totally recognize this, that I'm bad at video games.
Right. Same.
Yeah. But I'm excited for the trickle down effect it's going to have for other esports as well, as people become more aware of the scene's existence. And I've told this story a lot on the PvA Nightly Rundown about how all it took for me to get into Overwatch League was seeing 10 minutes of the the Overwatch Watchpoint show, which isn't even Overwatch League games being played live. It's 4 people talking about it. And I just enjoyed the production value of it so much, and how I grew up watching sports, and how similar it was to that experience I had watching sports growing up, that like I was instantly attracted to it. And now here I am, and I would say probably like 60% of my free time is spent watching esports. Like I fucking love esports. And so even if you're not into Fortnite, there are probably people who play Overwatch or League or Rainbow Six or, you know, Rocket League, that don't realize that there's a professional scene that goes along with this game that they love playing. And that they may see Fortnite has one and be like, man, I wonder if the game that I play has this thing. And all it takes is just a moment of them interacting with it to get to fall in love with it. And like, why would we hate on something that gives people the opportunity to get connected to the thing that we love? Like, that's the whole thing with Fortnite too. Like, I don't particularly like Fortnite, but I FaceTimed my nephew on his birthday, and he was having a LAN party with his friends. There were like 5 people at his house all playing Fortnite together. And it was just like, that was me with Halo growing up, you know, or NFL Blitz, like back in the day. Why would I hate something that is getting my nephew into the same hobby that I've given so much of my life over to? Like, I don't know. It's just shit. We're shitty to each other in this gaming culture.
Also, why would you hate on something that's so clearly connecting people? Like, that's another thing. Events like this, and I saw this when I was writing about watch parties for the Boston Uprising. People would come into those bars and see how excited people were and would get a contact excitement from it. They might not understand 100% of what's going on, but they can recognize maybe the basics of what's going on. But whenever there was a massive cheer, you could see patrons who weren't watching the games look over. Some started to actually filter over and actually start to watch with the people, asking questions. Like, events like this are great for esports in general because it shows the level of hype and excitement around this stuff, and that gets people curious about it. The live experience is very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, let's move on. Cody, what is your topic?
Now for something completely different. There's a story that came out today, or not today, but it came out this week. Activision announced some kill streak rewards for Modern Warfare, for the multiplayer, and I don't think they thought that this would be a story, like a massive story. Like, the tweet was pretty short, it's pretty low key.
It was just an image and a tweet, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was kill streaks are back. And this is the tweet. Own the opposition, reap the rewards. Kill streaks make a return in #Modern Warfare. Tune in August 1st for the full multiplayer premiere, which happened today. And the 3 kill streaks they revealed were the Juggernaut suit, an infantry assault vehicle, and White Phosphorous. And it's that last one that got a lot of attention. For people who don't know, White Phosphorous is, like mustard gas, a chemical weapon that is very deadly. And historically and currently it has been used in civilian areas in Modern Warfare. It has impacted civilians and has impacted civilian areas in pretty horrific ways. I put a link to a thread in our show notes, but it just has absolutely horrific consequences for those that come in contact with it. And it's important to note this isn't the first time that White Phosphorus has been used in COD. It was used as a special grenade type in the Black Ops games. And this isn't the first time that this Modern Warfare, the reboot, whatever you want to call it, has gotten a little bit of controversial attention. The whole concept behind this Modern Warfare is that the single player is taking a very grounded, very gritty approach to Modern Warfare, to telling a story. They've talked about addressing themes like child soldiers, civilian casualties. They've even mentioned like shooting, like the consequences involved in shooting a baby. So they're like tackling very dark things And this is a franchise that's mostly known for, despite some moments, being just a big like popcorn flick, like a Michael Bay film, pretty much. A very jingoistic, very like hoorah kind of Michael Bay film, which is redundant because Michael Bay films are already like that. And so I think something like this comes out and seems to run counter to that. Obviously, there's always been a disconnect between the tone struck in the single player of Call of Duty games and the tone struck in the multiplayer of Call of Duty games. And even while this weapon isn't new to COD, there's something that's kind of stand out about the stark contrast here in messaging and in tone. I don't know if this is something that rubbed you guys the wrong way. Is this fine to you? I saw the division and the conversation happening on Reset Era on Twitter. People coming out saying this is fine. It's just a video game. It's just a multiplayer war game. What do you expect? People kind of countering that with you're essentially using a war crime and weaponizing a war crime in a gamified way. Where do you guys kind of fall on this issue?
So the use of white phosphorus is a war crime in civilian areas, but it's not a war crime to use it at all. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's in civilian areas. It defies the Geneva Convention.
So for me, seeing Call of Duty do this, I'm trying to skate on some thin ice here.
Yeah,
is not
is
shocking for me, and it leads me to not be super offended because, just to be honest, I kind of expect this kind of stuff out of Call of Duty. I'm not a fan of their campaigns, and they put you in these moments where you make these moral choices, or you don't have the moral choice. I'm thinking about where you're embedded in the terrorist cell, right? The classic
Russian.
You probably shot the people, but you didn't know you didn't have to. And I didn't play that one. I didn't get into COD till after that. But the only campaign I ever played was Black Ops, and I quit where I was forced to torture a guy. I had to stick glass in a guy's mouth and punch him in the mouth, and I'm like, I'm not down for this. So oh, okay, Call of Duty's doing Call of Duty things. Mm-hmm. How many of these stories are we going to cover before we realize that this is Call of Duty? I don't think that they were shocked by this making the news. I think they probably counted on it to some degree. And I may be wrong. Maybe not this particular element, but definitely these dark, gritty things they're getting into.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I don't know how well they typically tackle these in the story. But one of the things that I think I saw you type, there is that disconnect between can you have a serious story that tackles these issues well, and a multiplayer that's use all these awesome things. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's where there's kind of this disconnect.
Well, and I think that's where Battlefield 1, I think, got it right in a lot of ways. The campaign is really, really good at I just remember that first level, you play these stories until you die, and then when you die, it tells you who you were. And just kind of humanizes these what are often faceless and nameless players that these avatars that you take on in order to participate in these games. And the Battlefield series does a good job because it doesn't gamify the violence mechanics within it, in the sense of work up to get to this, work up to get to that, in this kind of kill streak way. But I'm with you, Larry. This has always been Call of Duty's struggle. And this whole idea that Call of Duty's trying to tell a serious story, it's the first time they've ever tried to do that, that's
what the original Modern Warfare was.
Exactly. And they try, and even I think about World at War, they tried to tell a compelling story about World War II and that. And then you got into the multiplayer, and there were bouncing Bettys in the game. And what did it focus on whenever you stepped on a bouncing Betty? Your limbs getting blown off, and it would zoom in on you not having your legs or things like that. And these were horrific things that were happening to, and yes, it was soldiers and not civilians at the time. But again, it was it took this thing that they tried to have a serious tone about in the story, in the campaign, and then just kind of making a mockery of it is strong language, but I don't know of softer language that makes sense within the multiplayer, because it was put in this like game sense, and you felt a sense of victory whenever you were able to get an enemy to do it. And so this White Phosphorous thing, like, I guess it didn't move the needle for me at all, because a kill streak reward for ages has been get 25 kills in a row and you get a nuke. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's the single most, when we did our podcast all together for our 24-hour stream, and Ben asked us a technology we would go back and uninvent, Larry said the nuke, and we were all like, yeah, because that's a weapon you can't not have civilian casualties from, you know? And so yeah, this to me does not come as any kind of surprise, but I think I also agree with you, Larry, in that I think Activision is banking on this dichotomy between the multiplayer and the single player taking on this kind of contentious conversation around it.
Well, they're also banking on the single player taking on that specifically. There's going to be so many think pieces written about this game when it comes out. Mm-hmm. I don't even know, like, ignore the baby, which is a whole thing. But like, there are going to be a lot of moments in this game I already know without playing it that are going to rub people the wrong way. And it's going to create conversation around it. People are going to write about it. And it's going to expose the game to a lot of people who haven't been exposed to it already by the marketing campaign.
And I want to go a little further in why it didn't move the needle for me. And Bill for Real says, couldn't they just not use White Phosphorous? I mean, obviously you're killing people, but its connotation is what is the weird thing. And I think that's definitely an element. But I think about it from another angle even. Like, gunshot wounds are pretty horrific things.
Yeah.
Even shooting people. And in games, you shoot them and they just drop dead, and that's that. And like most of the time, that's not how real life works. Like, this blunt force weapon tears through somebody, and it takes some time for you to lose enough blood to stop functioning. Like, it's a horrible thing, and we've gamified it. And so for me, I have a hard time like being like, well, I'd rather just shoot people. Like, I have a hard time drawing the line past, if we're going to gamify violence, we've gamified violence. And the way I'm talking about this right now makes me very uncomfortable, but we do need to examine these things from time to time, I suppose.
I think it's true. I think the point that I hear you making is, like, if you're going to go dark and gritty, do it. Like, don't half-ass it. This did move the needle for me because I recognize everything you guys have said. This is not the first time Call of Duty has been in this spot. It's not the last time it'll be in this spot. But that doesn't mean that we can't critique it and engage with it.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't become like it has become normalized for a lot of people. Oh, Call of Duty is going to use a nuke. Oh, Call of Duty is going to use bouncing betties. Oh, Call of Duty is going to use White Phosphorous. There is a point at which you sort of have to question this stuff. And it's at the point where they're trying to shift the conversation in a more serious way. And at the same time, using those same tools that they believe are so horrific in a really gamey way. And so I think the contrast is just much more stark here. And I also believe that, like, part of the reason that some of these things may have worked in Battlefield 1 and may have worked in even World at War are the fact that those are games focused on battlefields. And there is a little bit less pressure to kind of tackle that stuff because that we've traditionally been conditioned to think of those battlefield engagements as gamey as gamers. When you bring it into the modern day and bring it into modern warfare where civilian casualties were a thing in those wars as well, but when you bring it home like they're trying to bring it home here, like domestic terrorism, like bombed out homes in Afghanistan and the Middle East, you immediately are calling upon images of like innocence and pain. And you're using something like White Phosphorous to call that into question as well. Like, they clearly want to tackle this stuff and address it in some ways and then sort of like skirt around it in other ways. It's sort of kind of what Ubisoft has done by like making political games and then choosing not to engage it by just saying they're not political.
Our game takes place in a fallen DC. It's not political.
Exactly. Like, I just think I don't know if this, and this is getting at a question of mine, but I personally don't know if the model of release that Call of Duty has traditionally stuck to until last year, actually. I don't know if that's aged well in 2019, especially if you're going for this approach. And there are other ways it hasn't aged as well, but I think this kind of calls into question whether it has aged well in 2019.
And that's where the actual conversation for me happens, because guns are used just as much to perpetuate war crimes and do horrific things as White Phosphorous is. And so for me, it's less about the White Phosphorous and more is Call of Duty the place to be trying to tell these stories and what Call of Duty does. Like, and I've been saying that since they started talking about how gritty this is going to be. And because I'm a pacifist. For those of you who don't know, that was something that came up a lot on Player 3 podcast. I don't know how much it comes up here on PvA Radio, but I'm a pacifist, and we'll get to that joke at a later time. It's not the time.
I stopped myself.
There's just a funny moment in the Player 3 podcast with that fact, but and to me, what we do with guns is just as egregious as what is done with White Phosphorous, and there have been more innocent lives and civilian casualties through the use of guns and bombs and other means that we use in every single multiplayer shooter video game than White Phosphorous has ever taken. And that's not to minimize the impact that White Phosphorous has had in the
It is singularly horrific, though.
It is singularly horrific, but what about gun violence isn't horrific, you know? But the fact of the matter is that Call of Duty is not the space to have this. Like, this is the game that for a couple of years tried to have a story that did commentary about the industrialization and commercialization of warfare, and then you could have fucking neon orange skins and dab on people in the multiplayer. Like, this has always been the issue with Call of Duty, and to me it's not about White Phosphorus. It's just about, like, you can't have your cake and eat it too, because you're not going to be able to separate yourself from this thing. If you want to get nitty and gritty and make a statement about war, then you need to nix the multiplayer stuff altogether and make the statement that you're wanting to make, and stop trying to, like, harbor your esports scene in the middle of this thing as well. You know, like, that's where I come down on this. It has nothing to do with White Phosphorus. It's just Call of Duty can't be the space to do this.
I think there's a broader cultural issue here too of we're kind of we're double-minded as a society. A lot of us, not the whole society, but a lot of people, like, they have this war is horrific, but woo, when the bad guys get it, they deserve it.
Exactly.
And so I am not a pacifist, but I think that our attitude toward violence is, and I've stolen this from a Jedi master, but I think that violence should always be considered a failure. Even if we get to a point where we feel like it was completely necessary to stop evil, like, we failed in order to get to that point. And it should always be mourned and never celebrated. And you can't make that statement and then dab on people. It's just those are not congruent.
Yeah. It's also difficult to make that statement when literally the only way to engage your game is violent.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are ways to do that. Like, and a lot of people have pointed to Spec Ops: The Line as an example of a game that did this, which used White Phosphorus as well, and actually used it quite poignantly and pointed to how horrific it is. But I think you're right, Luke. I think there's an argument to be made that perhaps Call of Duty trying to say something is worth it because it has more eyes on it and it's able to reach a lot more people than a lot of indie games that might try to tackle the same issues. But I also think for years they have just been, as I said, just blockbusters. And that complements the tone of their multiplayer a lot better than if they're trying to go for something somber and sullen, like a Tim O'Brien novel. Like, I don't know if either separate them, release them as separate products and in separate years, or just do away with what you're trying to do. Because I think you're right. I ultimately don't think that this game is going to tackle any of the issues it's trying to address in any meaningful amount of depth, because it's going to be a 6 to 7 hour campaign, and then after that it's expected that everybody will just migrate over and forget everything they just saw in that game, forget all of the somber melancholy notes of the story, forget the war is hell message and then migrate over to the multiplayer and just beat the shit out of each other
and participate and do that in the same environments that you just
exactly
played the campaign in.
That's the uncomfortable part too, and I think it might have been Nathan Grayson who pointed it out in his preview. Like he said, ultimately he was playing the multiplayer, he was having a good time, and then he like takes a second and he noticed like he got hit by white phosphorus and he ran away and he's like gagging, he's like breathing heavily, he gets out of it, and then his vision clears as it does in 5 seconds. And he sees he's in a bombed out shelter that was clearly someone's home. Like you are still playing in the same civilian environments that you are in the main story, but it's stripped of its context. And there's something
it's turned
kind
into
of
a playground.
It's turned into a playground. There's something disturbing about that.
Yeah. Which is a critique of. I mean, that's how every Call of Duty game has worked.
Oh yeah, no,
too.
and it's a critique of not just Call of Duty. It's a critique of a lot of modern military shooters.
Yeah.
But it becomes a point of starker contrast when you're trying to say something.
Yes. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah. A lot of this conversation is just thinking out loud for me, because a lot of this stuff I haven't resolved what I think yet, and I, to get back to what I was saying earlier, the gun violence it's terrible too, and we've gamified that. Like I think about Grand Theft Auto and the flack that it catches. Like Grand Theft Auto at its core turns all kinds of horrific stuff into a big joke, and I don't know, I don't personally feel consistent being outraged about one of these things and not the other. But doing the seriousness and the jokes in the same game, like that is for sure, that is the rub. What message do you want to send?
And a lot of this, I think, comes down to context. Like, if you're shooting people up in Apex, I think it's a little different because there's a healthy distance created. Like, it's the same thing with action movies. Like, we're willing to watch Arnold Schwarzenegger mow down like tons of, or Sylvester Stallone, whoever, mow down tons of people. Keanu Reeves mow down tons of people. But it's kind of like it's cartoony and like the expectation is set. It's in a heightened world. When you try to do that again, we're coming out to the same point. When you try to do that in a grounded, very real feeling world, it starts to be like there's an uncanny valley there, and it starts to become a little disturbing.
Yeah. And I also think about games like Rainbow Six Siege, right? Like the premise of that game, half the time you're playing as the terrorist who's trying to successfully execute their mission, you know? Like gamifying that, like I appreciate this conversation because it allows us to examine the context that a lot of our games exist in, and how kind of at the end of the day, when you step back and looked at them, they're kind of fucked, you know? Like,
yeah, because we've normalized it.
Yeah. But that violence is such a necessary utility in like the games that we play. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting topic, but the problem is that the three of us are thinking about this far more than 99% of the people that are going to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare. You know,
and 99% of those people are going to play multiplayer.
Yeah,
and probably 90% of the people who made the game.
Yeah.
Salty, go ahead.
Did either of you play the first Homefront game?
I did not.
I played a little
I've heard
bit
you rave
of it.
about it.
So
I played
multiplayer
part of the
garbage.
second one.
But
Homefront: The Revolution.
The first game had a really great campaign. It was written by the same people that wrote Red Dawn. But there was a mission in that game where you were capturing the North Koreans were about to launch White Phosphorous on civilian targets, and if I remember right, you're breaking in and you're redirecting those missiles to North Korean sites instead. And it was a moment that stuck with me, and they did it well in the game, as far as like showing you the horrors of war, because you launch the first one successfully at the target, but then you screw up on the second one and detonate it overhead, and it rains down on the people around you, and they're bad guys, but you have to like run through this field where people are just like burning up all around you. And it really like it messed with me. And it was like a really like good moral moment of, holy crap, I just did this on purpose to another group way far away, but it's a lot different when I'm right here seeing it on the ground. But then they turned around and it was a kill streak reward in their multiplayer. So
yeah. Salty says, what if Call of Duty flipped the script and put the warfare from the point of view of someone who has bombs dropping daily, but they're the innocent person in a war-torn area, not the military operative that Call of Duty paints as the hero? And they're trying to do that. Like that's, I think that's the first mission. You're a little girl who's like hiding away from what's happening around you, right? Like trying to navigate through the dangers.
And that little girl then becomes radicalized. And she leads like I think a terrorist group that kind of launches an attack in London or something like that. But you play as that character throughout the game. Yeah.
So they're trying to do those things, and that's the rub. Like, they're trying to do those things and do these other things as well. He also says GTA firmly plants you as the knowingly bad guy doing bad things, in my opinion. I can't remember a time where GTA had a really good guy that is just doing incredibly bad things.
Yeah, it's known for having pretty vile protagonists.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this isn't a conversation.
In a pretty debased world. All around. Yeah.
I mean, it's a satire in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
This isn't a conversation we're going to sort out in like half an hour, 45 minutes, but I do think it's an interesting, I think this calls into question a lot of things that we take for granted and things that we assume are normal in games.
Yeah.
It's a good point of conversation.
Dude, and I always love the conversations where we don't necessarily all particularly align with one another in our thinking of it.
Yeah.
So it always makes for a much more interesting conversation. Salty as Chuck thinks this is way better than the Ninja and Mixer conversation. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for our show today. I did not prepare a game because it's been weeks since I've prepared a game, and I'll just be honest, I totally forgot. I totally forgot. I'm giving Larry another week to get his mind around how I lie. So we're going to get out of here, guys. Let's go around the circle. Who are you? Where can people find you? And what are you going to be tweeting about this week? Larry, let's start with you.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at LairHuntsZombies, LARHUNTS Zombies. And depending on how things go, I might be tweeting about that. I already forgot the name of it. That game I was talking about at the beginning of the show.
Marvel Ultimate Alliance?
No. Blackout
Overwatch.
game? Blackout Club.
The Blackout Club.
Yeah. I'm really interested.
You got to tell me how that is if you get it. Because if we were talking about possibly playing it together as well.
Yeah. Because it's multiplayer. It's co-op.
Did not even realize that. It makes it even more appealing.
Yeah, it's 1 to 4, I think.
All right. Codsworth.
I'm Cody. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. What am I going to be tweeting about? Probably going to be tweeting a little bit about Wolfenstein as I continue to play through it. I will tweet about my victory in Sekiro once I finish it. And, well, speaking of violence, I'm probably going to be tweeting about my impressions of the new Quentin Tarantino movie after I see it this weekend.
Not actively his 10th movie. Not his 10th, because Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 was just one movie, according to him.
Actively not a fan of his, but I will talk about my impressions of the movie once I finish seeing it.
All right. Well, I am Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. I changed this again. This is the last time, though. I wanted to get PVA in the handle because we're really pouring into it. And hopefully this week I'll be tweeting about some writing I've been doing.
Yes.
Very excited. Getting back into the game, boys and girls. So, yeah, I'm also probably going to be tweeting about my sick, nasty plays in League of Legends as Sejuani. So, all right, guys, we're going to get out of here. If you're hanging out over on Twitch, though, stick around. We're going to hang out a little bit for the after party lounge. But we do this. This has been PvA Radio. We get together every single Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, or your CAFA, if you will. And Larry, what do we want people to do with that?
I want you to go next door, fire up your neighbor's lawnmower, and just mow it into their lawn. And also spam any mode into the chat.
All right. And if you can't catch us live over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio, you can watch us the very next day over on youtube.com/PvA Radio, broken out topic by topic, or You can listen to the entire thing on podcast services everywhere, including iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and soon to come Barbershop Quartets right to your door. So we're going to get out of here, guys. Thanks so much for listening to this conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well on any of these topics down in the comments, or you can email me, Luke, at playerversusall.com, and we may bring up your discussion point on the show. Until next week, though, guys, we love you, and goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Would you kindly pick up that short